Hi, and welcome to My Words, Our Journey, the podcast, Season 11, Episode 2 of Less Than Perfect Endings. I'm Monty, your host and author. In Episode 1, we met Drake, a guy in the wrong or right place at the wrong or right time, depending on your take, and Mallory, a girl he saved. Together, they hit the road west with no real plan. Let's start today with Episode 5, Our Spot. The pair decided to take I-40 west through Arkansas, Oklahoma, the upper part of Texas, and then into New Mexico, where they'd stay for a while. It was a good plan as any, Drake thought, and it seemed to make Mallory happy. During their first stop in Arkansas, after he'd gassed up, he surprised her by pulling over just outside of town. There was an RV park. The area seemed rural, and a fine place for her to learn to drive a stick shift. She had never driven a manual, understood the concept, but was adamant she could learn quick. To her credit, she pulled out onto what he assumed was still State Road 49, just outside of Brinkley. By the time she had approached the Finnell Cemetery, it was like she had been driving a manual for years. After driving for a while, starting, stopping, practicing in parking lots, inclines, she drove them to Baskin-Robbins, where she treated herself and her instructor to a dipped waffle cone, vanilla ice cream. When they exited the shop and stepped off the curb, Mallory hesitated on which side of the car to go to, driver or passenger side. Drake laughed, went around to the passenger side. He put on the best of the 80s and leaned his seat back. It was a couple hours later when he woke up to the Challenger pulling into a motel parking lot. Mallory said, "Saw a sign for this place. They have a bar next to the hotel that looks fun." He bit his tongue. Had to, unless he wanted to keep bickering. The restaurant didn't have a name. It looked like an old gas station turned into a small mom-and-pop joint. No judgment on his part. His best burger back home came from a place just like it. The bar? Its name was Our Spot. After checking into the motel, they tossed their backpacks onto the beds and headed down to check out the diner. Mallory had decided 1 room, 2 beds was the best option. Spend less money, stay close together in case of trouble. Drake had the hamburger steak special, home fries, applesauce, and a tea. Mallory, grilled chicken salad, soda. They didn't talk much while they ate. They were both tired of being in the car, happy to be out of it. Nice to be having a good meal that didn't come out of a bag. Our Spot was not very busy when they walked in. Once inside, it was kind of what Drake had expected. Several pool tables, a lot of smoke, jukebox playing old country, and several pair of warm boots just waiting for the right lady to hit the wooden dance floor. Drake had agreed to play a couple games of pool, have a couple beers, and then call it an early evening since he wanted to be on the road before the sun came up. When they were done playing, without him even noticing, the place had really picked up. The band was just getting ready to play. Mallory wanted to stay. Drake gave her a key. Just asked her to be quiet when she came back to the room. A little Old Dominion on his phone, a nice shave, hot shower, full belly. Drake was feeling pretty good when he put on his Adidas shorts, laid out his black tee he'd expected to wear the next day. He hoped to get a lot of miles behind him over the next couple days. There was a new song he wanted to add to his playlist. He couldn't remember the name of the artist. He was thinking maybe it was Dierks Bentley. He wasn't sure. Before he could complete the search, someone banged into the door hard, heavy. When he opened the door, he was not prepared for what he saw. Mallory was on the back of a cowboy, had her shirt off, and was using it in kind of a way to choke him, pulling back hard. He must have hit the door trying to knock her off. It took him a couple of seconds for Drake to notice the young lady that was trying to hit Mallory with a pool stick. As the three danced around, it was almost comical, but it wasn't. They were cutting into his rest time. He saw the blood on her lip. "Mallory, go ahead. Hop down. Take care of whatever you have going on with this young lady, and let me and your new friend here figure things out." She did as he asked, but when she jumped down, She kicked the man in the butt, forcing him to lose his balance and stumbling into the wall. Drake tried to be polite and help the guy up, regain his composure. "We can let the ladies handle this, or you can choose the hard way." He always liked to give him an option. The swing was that of a drunk 20-something that had never really learned how to fight. Easily missed by Drake, he took the opportunity to check on Mallory, who had taken her new bestie to the ground and was wiping her face with dirt and small rocks in the parking lot. Next thing he knew, the young man had picked up the pool stick and was bringing it down straight towards his head. Drake was anything but quick, but he did move fast enough just to get out of the way. It still connected with his shoulder. Hurt enough to make him mad. He hadn't had time to be mad up to this point. The kid was drunk, so Drake didn't want to be too rough. Besides, he had no idea how this whole thing started. One punch to the nose, and before the guy could fall, Drake stepped in, helped him to the ground slowly, and said, "We're done here." Rubbing his shoulder, he watched as Mallory stood and kicked the girl in the back, causing her to fall and roll over. "We done here?" he asked. "Grab your stuff. I'll meet you at the car." "But, grab your stuff. I'll meet you at the car." As she huffed and puffed, Mallory tossed her backpack into the trunk with his. He had taken the plate off, tossed it aside, and then pulled a fresh one out from under the trunk lining. Mallory watched as he screwed it on, and then they were in the Challenger, back on the highway in short order. They were both sweaty, Mallory bleeding a little from her lip. Drake knew his shoulder would be sore in the morning. He had a decision to make. Logically, it wasn't that hard. But even with her way of always finding trouble, he was drawn to her, wanted to get to know the real Mallory a little better. She must have sensed his dilemma. "Do you want to hear my side of the story?" Chapter 6. Lost and Found. The pair, individually, had decided to play nice. The next few days went without incident. They weren't making great time, but they weren't in a hurry to get, well, nowhere in particular. Mallory had offered to drive a couple hours out of Oklahoma City, and Drake decided it'd be a nice gesture to let her drive. It wasn't 15 minutes later, he was fast asleep. When he stirred, got his bearings, and looked at the time, he had been out for almost 4 hours. Mallory was listening to some 70s rock, looked very comfortable behind the wheel. Drake was glad he had let her drive. He obviously needed the break, and she looked happy to be driving. It was a couple songs later that he saw the sign. Wichita, 35 miles. Mallory? When did we decide to go to Wichita?" "Haven't decided anything. Just heading west like we agreed." What's wrong?" "Well, I think we're heading north, and I feel pretty confident we're in Kansas instead of Texas." Her turda. Just south of Wichita, the couple pulled into a small roadside diner. It was adjacent to a busy truck stop. The restrooms were clean, the food decent, conversation light. Drake really didn't care where they were, but he did like to give Mallory a hard time. She was taking it well. Neither had been to Colorado, so on the fly, they decided to go north a bit longer, then west towards Colorado Springs. Somewhere along the line, one of them had heard it was nice there. Drake was back behind the wheel, slowly pulling out of the parking spot because of all the traffic. That's when Mallory barked, "Oh no, not today, my friend," and she shot out of the slow-moving car. Drake watched as she approached the man and woman. He had not seen what had happened, but it was something that set her off. Drake pulled the car back into a parking spot and parked. As he stepped out, he turned to see the man push Mallory to the ground. A couple minutes later, he was standing over the guy. His knuckles hurt. Mallory was pulling at his arm. It was probably the third time that she had said it when he heard, "We need to go, now." She directed him to the passenger seat. Keys were still in the ignition. Doors slammed shut, and they were gone. 81 north to 70, then east to Colorado Springs. The car was quiet, only the hum of the tires on the road. Then Drake was startled by a cough coming from the back seat. He slowly turned his head so he could see who their passenger was. Mallory made the introductions. Drake, Gwen. Gwen, Drake. Chapter 7. Gwen. Drake was trying to process what was happening. It seemed like they had picked up a stray. He could tell Mallory had no problem picking up a complete stranger. He, on the other hand, had some questions. But Mallory broke the silence with, "Can we start thinking about dinner? I'd love a good burger." Drake was screaming in his head, but to his credit, his words were measured and calm. "That would be great, Mallory, except we just had dinner. But I should have gassed up. We can pull over, stop somewhere, get you a snack if you're still hungry. Then Gwen can figure out what she wants to do. I'm sure she doesn't want to be stuck with us." Then, to his surprise, "We're going to Colorado Springs, Gwen. You up for a road trip?" His head was going to explode. They stopped at DQ, then gassed up, and then pulled over and went to some picnic tables. As they sat there, Mallory folded her legs up to her chin, wrapped her arms around them, and said, "Okay, Gwen, convince Drake you're not a serial killer." Gwen laughed. "Serial killer? No, not a serial killer. But Drake's instincts are correct. A lovely couple like you? Well, you should stay as far away from me as possible." Drake was visibly relieved. "Sounds great." Mallory, "We're not a couple. Met kind of the same way we just did." Drake to Mallory, "We are in a good place. Let's just leave it at that, okay?" Over milkshakes, Gwen told them what she wanted them to know about her. Lies sprinkled with a little truth for the most part. She hinted she had money, but never really said so. She could tell the couple was running from something. She used that. Hinted she was doing the same. In reality, she was moving towards something. The way Drake had apparently blacked out and beat the guy at the truck stop nearly to death was something she could use in her life right now. So, she desperately wanted to hang on to the pair. But she had to play it cool. Her in was Mallory. Drake was just trying to shake her like the blanket you just realized your pet peed on. The truck stop had been a scary experience for her, and she didn't have to lie about that. The event was pulling on Mallory's heartstrings. Drake was unconsciously rubbing his knuckles, seeing the guy's face, bloody, broken. He had watched his mother and sister be abused by men that beat them. Those men, for the most part, had paid a price. A man shouldn't hit a woman. To him, it was plain and simple, cut and dry. The blackouts and the brutality, it just was. That's what he had decided. It just was. The way he was made, it just was. In his DNA, it just was the way it was meant to be. He didn't like or trust Gwen, but he could tell Mallory did, and it sounded like she was more than happy to pay her way, plus some. So there was that. Chapter 8. Wedding Destination. Granby Lake, cabins and resort, set on the northeast part of the lake that it was named after. It was a chosen destination for weddings for several reasons. Horseback riding, fly fishing, mountain biking, a large pontoon boat on the lake, several trails, and spectacular views. It was a perfect place to unplug from the day-to-day. That's why Kenny, Trish, and several of their family and friends were making the trip. There were a few drawbacks, however. There was little to no cell service in the cabins or the nearby area. Each guest had been told, or warned, depending how you looked at it. Also, from the airport, it was just shy of 2.5 hours to the cabins. Kenny and Trish had decided early on, if they were going to ask their family and friends to travel, they'd be incurring the majority of the expense. Kenny would tell anyone that would listen. Trish had done an amazing job coordinating schedules, flights, special requests, and so much more. Trish had gotten her and Kenny's room for an extra day on the front and on the back. The front to make sure everything was perfect, and the extra day just to be lazy. before heading back. There wasn't a honeymoon scheduled any time soon. The money that would have went to the honeymoon instead was to ensure that their guests would be well taken care of. It was well worth it to Kenny and Trish. There was no direct route to the Boulder airport, to the lake. That was fine with the couple. They were taking in the beautiful scenery, stopped at a produce stand, and also scheduled a spontaneous Grand Adventure balloon tour for the entire group. Kenny had told Trish he only planned on getting married once, so if she wanted a balloon ride, they were going to take a balloon ride. A stop at Tabernash Honey Company, and everyone would have a cute glass bottle of honey in their arrival gift basket, all to be passed out by Kenny and Trish as folks arrived. Now let's be clear, Kenny did his part too. He said yes to everything Trish asked. The flowers, the cabins, how many days, music, pastor, colors to be worn by the bridesmaids and the groomsmen. You name it, he said yes. While Kenny and Trish enjoyed their travel to their destination wedding, Gwen was trying to work on Drake and Mallory a bit. Plant a seed, if you would. Gwen to the pair. I have a job in a little place called Granby Lake. It pays well. Have a place to stay for a few days, enjoy the mountains, lake, trails, nature stuff. Sprinkle in a little work with a lot of leisure and a nice payday. She continued, I could use a break. If we're all being honest, life is too stressful. Need a place to recharge. Maybe a horseback ride. Watch the sunset from the porch swing while sipping a frozen drink. Drake and Mallory just let her talk. They had talked to each other enough over the last few days. When she had finished playing the seed, she sat back in her chair, asked Mallory to turn up the music. She would leave the two to their own thoughts for a bit. Gwen had been around long enough to know that they hadn't known each other long. They were still trying to figure out the relationship. And they were running from something. A who? A what? She wasn't sure, and it really didn't matter for her purpose. And I think that's a great place for us to stop today. Thank you for listening, and as always, have a great day.